Hey guys, it's been a moment since we've done a live stream, so hopefully this is working. I'm coming to you guys from my home office, my home editing suite. I don't work on Fridays, and I decided I wasn't going into the studio because yesterday was a very interesting day for me. Anyhow, I thought this is a great time to hang out with you all, answer some questions, and then give you guys sort of like my commentary and opinion on some of the things that you all are about to start seeing drop, right? Because there are a ton of cameras that are going to be released here over the next month to maybe 6 months. So going into next year, probably February, March at the latest time frame. And you're going to see a lot of 8K cameras. You're going to see more 4K cameras. You're going to see cameras that can do some very special things. And it just got me thinking, like, what would it take for me to switch systems? Like, if I had the ability to shape a camera company to build me a camera in the exact way that I would want it, what are the things that I would be looking for? And that's what I'm going to cover in today's live stream. And obviously, if you guys have an opinion, you guys can jump in. And if anyone wants to participate in the live stream, let me know in the chat, and I will throw out a link, and you guys can jump on the call and kind of voice your own opinions. So with that, let me just say thank you and hello to everybody who's here. Max, thanks for showing up. Lothar, thanks for showing up. Steelworks Media, thanks for nice to see you always. So you guys may or may not remember. If you guys follow the channel, you probably do remember. But when I did my Canon C70 review, which was not a traditional review, it was like I'm talking to an employee. If you didn't see that video, I'll try to link it in one of the cards after this live broadcast goes out, so you guys can maybe check that out. But I basically said that everything that I loved about the Canon C70 were also the things that made me want to go or expect a proper or bigger brother cinema camera to also have. So if I could say to Canon, make me a C500 Mark II type camera with an RF mount, improve the battery life if you can. I'm happy with the ND filter solution. I want it to be full frame, and I want the sensor to be a DGO sensor, so dual gain output sensor. And probably the biggest and most important piece for me at this point, as I think about my business, my workflow, some of the decisions and choices that I've made to get a more simplified approach where we can knock out a lot of content in a very small amount of time. This would be huge if Canon could do it, to make it so that whatever this new cinema camera that Canon will be putting out, and I believe they're doing 2 of them, if it could match the color to other cameras. So if they're going to come out with a C500 Mark III, for example, or a new version of the C700, which I believe that is coming, and they give it a DGO sensor that matches the C70, that matches the C300 Mark III, an RF mount, and maybe improve the battery life. And if they're not going to improve the battery life, then maybe include a power cord that when you plug it in, it's also recharging the battery, which the C500 Mark II doesn't do. I think that Canon would be well on their way to having the perfect cinema camera. Will they do it? I'm going to say maybe not. And, Ali just mentioned something. I'm going to put it up here. But this would actually be really cool too if they would include the high frame rate options in quality that we get out of the C70 into a flagship camera like a C500 Mark III, or I guess they probably will do it on the C700, but it sounds like to me that they're going to give us everything that we want in a C700 newer version, and they're going to limit the C500 Mark III again. And that's kind of unfortunate because at this day and age, in order to stay relevant and to stay competitive, they need to come out with something that is going to blow away what Red's doing, what Blackmagic is doing. And holding back features at this point, I should mention Sony too. Holding back features at this point, I believe, strongly believe, that it is what will ultimately hold Canon back. And I don't know if you guys follow any of my other social media stuff or not, but in case you all don't know, I've sold all my Sony kit, which means I don't own a Sony lens or a Sony camera anymore. And if you guys want to know why, I'll go into that in a minute. And I've sold all my Canon Cinema cameras, including the C70s and the C500 Mark IIs that I had. And for motion, I've moved straight into Red, which, it shouldn't be a surprise to any of you because I've often said that I really have always enjoyed what I get out of Red. And from a business standpoint, what that actually did is it freed up a whole ton of mental real estate and mental fatigue. I can prep faster. I can ingest media faster. I can simplify my workflows, whether I'm working out of my home office like I am here, or I'm in the studio, or whether Johnny's doing the work and he's doing it from his house or from the studio. We now have one type of media. We have one type of lens mount that we all shoot on. One battery solution, right? And it's just, everything has gotten that much easier. And the same gripe, complaint, and it's a very modern world problem, I suppose, to complain about some of these things, right? Because the truth is that there are so many great cameras that you can't really go wrong as long as you pick whatever is going to work for your projects, your clients, your style of shooting, and your workflow. And when you do make that decision, hopefully, if you need a second angle and you need another camera, you don't have to spend that higher dollar amount to get that exact same body again, right? Which for me, and I should say this because there are lots of people that cover Canon cameras on YouTube, and I've been one for years that has covered Canon cameras. Can you match Canon cameras? And the answer is yes. Can you do it without any effort or work? And the answer is no. There is no super simple way, and I understand that there are ACES workflows and color space transforms and a lot of different types of ways that you might be able to match cameras. But they all require some work. And if you ever need to not work, like if you want to get an image that is just flat out going to match coming out of the camera, throw it into your NLE, and you apply your own corrections and your own LUTs to it, you really need two of the same body. And that's true between the C500 Mark II, the C300 Mark III, the C300 Mark II, the OG C300, the C200. Like, it doesn't matter that they can all shoot in C-Log 2 or that they can all shoot in C-Log 3. They don't match. They're not identical. The sensors read and interpret light and color in unique ways. The image is processed in unique ways. And the closest you can get to matching them is if you shoot in RAW, and ideally you expose the same way for all the cameras. One thing that, again, it's a small complaint, because the advantages of what I'm about to say are also really important. On the C70, when you put the Canon focal reducer, the speed booster, gives you one extra stop of light, all of a sudden your information, as you're seeing, whether it be your focal length or your f-stop and so on, it's no longer accurate. Whereas you put the focal reducer on a Komodo, and guess what happens? The camera gives you the proper exposure information in camera. Why does Canon take shortcuts like that? I have no idea. With that said, the R5 continues to evolve in ways that make that camera, I don't want to totally speak out of turn here. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining. And Sean, thanks for joining. The R5 in many ways is better than the cinema line of cameras that Canon makes today. That RF mount gives it so much flexibility. And with the new firmware update and that dual fisheye lens that they just released, where it's going to in camera process that image for you, if that's what you want or need, that little system is very quickly becoming not just a specialty camera, which is the way that they positioned it originally, right? James, you're still awake. It's 4:30 a.m. in Korea. Hopefully you don't have to work tomorrow. But what I was saying is that the R5 seems to be the best investment when it comes to a Canon camera here in the last year, maybe longer, because of the continued support. You know, I'm not the guy that is going to shoot 8K RAW via the Atomos Ninja 5 Plus. I don't need it for that. But and I mentioned this, for motion, I've moved to RED. And that perfect camera that I had envisioned when I gave my C70 review is being released as the V Raptor by RED. Which I don't know if you guys know this about RED cameras or not. But regardless of which RED camera you shoot on, no one is ever left behind. And what I mean by that is that you can shoot on a Dragon X, you can shoot on a Komodo, you can shoot on a Monstro, and now you can shoot on a Raptor. And that color pipeline, that IPP2 color pipeline, makes it a breeze and incredibly easy to get your colors to line up between camera sensors. The differences, or the things that you begin to see, are actually how the sensor interprets the texture of that image. You know, like on Komodo, I haven't talked a lot about Komodo, but Komodo has natural depth. Even in a situation like this where I'm relatively close to these walls behind me, Komodo does a good job of creating the added separation because it does such a good job at interpreting the transition of light in a scene. The C70 does it as good, but the R5 does a better job than the C500 Mark II. And one thing that the R5 I've never had to deal with this on the R5. is fixed pattern noise. And when you're shooting in RAW, we all know that images aren't processed, right? So there is no noise reduction, saturation is not applied, all of the other things are not applied. On the C500 Mark II, if for whatever reason you didn't follow the guidance of black balancing the camera, doing that ABB, auto black balance on the camera, the way that it's recommended, and you switch over to shoot RAW, after you've been shooting just 4K, you will see fixed pattern noise. You'll see lines, streaks across the entire frame going up and down like this that are fixed noise that you cannot get rid of in post-production. So it's, I guess what I'm saying here really is, if Canon wants to stay competitive and stay relevant and win people like me back, which I don't think they care, honestly, whether I'm shooting on Canon or not. But if they want us to pay attention to what they're doing, then we need better tools than something like dual pixel autofocus. Whereas, I'll say two things about that. One is you need to be really well exposed, and in some cases slightly overexposed if your skin tone is like mine or darker, in order for dual pixel autofocus to work. And then the second thing is I didn't really use it. And I didn't use it because most of my lenses, and most of the time when I used that camera, I was using manual lenses. I was using the Canon C70 lenses. So dual pixel autofocus doesn't really work there. Focus assist works, but not the autofocus features. And since I'm on the topic of autofocus, if they don't put in their next cinema camera an RF mount, then you can expect slower autofocus performance and autofocus motors that the sound will make it into your internal camera microphones if you're using Canon EF lenses. So Canon really needs to, as I said, stop skimping around with what it is that they're giving us in some of these cameras and make sure that they put an RF mount in there, either improve the battery life or allow us include a charger or a mains cord to the camera that also then recharges the battery that's in the camera. That would be huge. RF mount, of course, a DGO sensor for sure, and improved high frame rates with autofocus support for RF lenses. That would be huge. That would make a camera worth $15,000, $16,000 in my opinion, because at that point, the only cameras that are basically competing with a camera like that, if Canon was to release it, would literally be like Airy or, flagship Red or something like that. And that's, I think, where they need to go. Because consider this. At this point, with so many cameras on the market from everyone, Sony, Blackmagic, Panasonic, Fuji, you name it, and more cameras hitting the market, finding the right package that is going to fit someone's budget is going to become that much easier. So the real selling point has to include workflow and the ability to scale, right? If I'm growing as a business and I need a second or third camera, I need to be able to scale my business in a way that makes sense. And buying more gear and being forced into buying 2 or 3 of the same cameras makes it too easy to pick a different brand other than Canon, in today's landscape. So for what it's worth, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And I just thought I would kind of share that with you all. I'm going to take a look here at your comments. So Max saying after the R5 he's done. Yeah, the R5 continues to evolve. I think it's a great camera. So there you go. Lothan, thank you very much for the kind words. Appreciate that, brother. Always nice to see Steelworks Media. And yeah, Ali mentioned already about the higher frame rates. I think that would be really, really cool. RF mount's great. I'm also very glad to film in C-Log 3 with the R5. So that's actually interesting. I ran a poll on the community tab on my channel asking if anyone, like, which one do you use, C-Log 2 or C-Log 3? And I think I got like 2 or 3 people that said C-Log 3. Everyone else, like over 150 people, said they use C-Log 2. So I've never been a C-Log 3 fan. I just never got into it, and I never bothered to understand the benefit of C-Log 3. So I've always kind of done that. Sean, I'm happy with the R5 too, but the overheating problem is unforgivable. So Sean makes a great point, which is also one reason why I don't use the R5 for video anymore. I can't. I'll say this. The R5 has never overheated on me. I've gotten the warning, but it's never shut down on me. But the fear that it might is what stops me from using it in that way. Yeah, so when you're using the Ninja 5 and if you're doing 4K, then I suppose that's a good workaround. Good afternoon, Kevin. And James is the guy I was talking about. It's 4:30 a.m. Hopefully he doesn't have to work. Good to see you, James. Always nice. And hello from Dubai. I don't know how to say this name, so sorry about that. Marcus, +1 for R5, Ninja 5, amazing combo, although overly sharp image is a slight bother to me. So Marcus, you can always use, so here's the thing. This is how I feel about image acquisition and then post-processing, right? It's always easier to get the absolute best possible image in camera and then soften it or process that image in a way that works for your project, your story, or your look and feel, rather than starting with a soft image or something that might not be super crisp and then trying to fix it in post. So I'm on the camp of clinical is better for acquisition because of the options that I have once I bring it into post-production. Whereas if I'm going more with a vintage acquisition, I will never be able to get to a clinical look in post-production. Hopefully that makes sense. So I tried shooting with the Atomos on the R5, and it's just top heavy. And it kind of took the fun out of it for me. I don't mind the Atomos on the C70. That's actually a good size for me, camera-wise. But on the R5, it just feels like the Atomos is a little bit too big. And when I put the batteries on there to make sure that, or the battery, longer battery on there, it just got a little too top heavy. And, you know, you see pictures like this on Instagram all the time where somebody sets down their camera and the camera's resting on the lens. Well, we don't have a locking R5 mount on the, we don't have a locking RF mount on the Canon R5, which is one reason why I don't ever like to set my camera down and allow the lens to support it from tipping over. Like, that just doesn't work for me. And I just won't do that. So when I have the Atomos on top of it, then I feel like I'm putting even more stress if I ever did sit the camera down. So that's just kind of my, I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I like to take care of my gear. And I feel like I don't take care of my gear if I'm stressing out the lens mount, which is arguably one of the most important pieces of the camera. So I've never actually shot in 1080 other than one very super quick test, but it's good to know that the R5 does a good job in 1080. Thanks for sharing that, Lothan. Red costs too much. Does the new one have any to focus? I'm guessing autofocus. And the answer is yes. The autofocus is an improved system on the Raptor. And it's supposed to be better than Komodo. I will say that the Komodo is the best budget option if you're going with Red. And you can plan on spending between $6,000 and $9,000 to get the camera to perform the way that you would need to. And consider this, the media by itself, right? Like how much this media cost, and then factor in, whether that works in your budget or not. The Komodo, in my opinion, very closely competes against the C70. And again, in my opinion, becomes a better option because of what Komodo is able to do and how well Komodo plays with all of the rest of the Red ecosystem. Whereas the C70 is the perfect companion for the C300 Mark III, but maybe not any other camera, in my opinion. And I know, as I mentioned, there are other people that think differently, and that's cool. I played with the footage from all of them. I've owned lots of cameras, and it isn't until the last 90 days or so that I've committed to a single camera system after a lot of thinking and a lot of going through all the feature benefits and cost analysis of what it is that we want to do as a company. And we didn't stick with the C70s. So there you go. I know filmmakers don't need autofocus perhaps, but videographers do. So I'm not knocking autofocus. I think autofocus is great. My real problem is that I really love the way that my Canon CNE lenses look, that look and feel, being able to match between 85 millimeters, 24 millimeters, or 14 millimeters without having to worry about color shifts or a difference in contrast or a difference in tonality or a difference in coatings because of the age of the lens. It just simplifies workflow, which is why I stick with those lenses. But yeah, autofocus is pretty cool. So I'm going to actually share a video, hopefully next week, where I talk about autofocus and the way that Red treats autofocus, comparing it to my experience with Canon's autofocus. And I think what a lot of people are going to be surprised, I'm not going to give it all away, but I'm just going to tell you that the way autofocus works on Canon cameras is the sensor itself and the algorithm, the autofocus algorithm, is physically looking for two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Okay? That is great when you're in good lighting situations. But when you're not in good lighting situations, it struggles. Red took a very different approach that does not affect, lighting doesn't affect it as much. That's all I'll say for now, but you all will, I think some of you are going to be like, is Carlos making this shit up? Because it's, I was pretty impressed. I'll just say that. I was pretty impressed. Let's see. Even though I don't know Komodo physically yet, playing with Komodo sample footage, color correction grade so much better than, it's hard to say, like the workflow, the R3D workflow in the IPP2 pipeline that works across any NLE, Resolve, Premiere, Final Cut, without any issues, with complete raw control. It's just really, really easy. I agree, Deanne. Yep, totally agree. I wish Canon would revisit the idea of fold-away monitor system better than the clamshell design, though. So I also agree. That clamshell annoyed me because it always made me feel like the camera was, not level. So like the horizon was always off, but it was really the clamshell monitor. The new monitor that they're using, I'm not a big fan of either. And I really do wish it was brighter. I wish it was daylight viewable. But I suppose that's why they sell the EVF. If there was a way for Canon to allow the camera not to have to be broken down when you put it in a bag to go travel to a client, that would actually be pretty cool too. Having to either remove the monitor or change the adjustment of that weird arm thing to make it work, it's something that's always bothered me. So, yeah. Let's see. What camera did you end up sticking with? So, today I am using Monstro and Komodo. And it is likely that a second Komodo body will be joining me, unless V-Raptor is available for me to purchase very soon. If V-Raptor turns into a Komodo situation, then I'm going to table the option of buying a V-Raptor until it is available, and I will continue to roll with Komodo because Komodo really is getting the bulk of the work for me. It's easy to travel with, it's easy to set up, and it's just awesome. And Monstro has become my studio camera. And this is not Monstro, by the way. This is a Mevo camera. Yeah, so, and you're right, James, V-Raptor, again, I have my name in the waiting list, but if they tell me that I'm not going to see it, for 6 months, I'm going to take my name off that list. What's the best cinema lens mount to invest in long term, RF, PL, or LPL? So I would say, so those are very different budgets. If you are interested in autofocus becoming part of the way that you work, RF. If you're more focused on commercial and narrative work, you're going to produce your own indie films and such, then PL or LPL would be my choice. PL lenses are expensive. If I was going to buy a set of PL lenses today, there really are two that I would consider, and they're expensive. First one would be the Cooke, the Primes S4 eyes. I would invest in those. And the second one, which are probably more realistic for the type of work that I do, would be the Tokina Vista Primes. Those would be the two that I would invest in if I was going to buy PL. RF, honestly, if there's a rumor going around that Canon is about to release, I say about to, but it's probably going to be next year. They're going to release a set of Canon CNE lenses that are RF mount if they make those lenses, those will be the lenses or the next lens set that I purchase. Let's see. Though he had the FX6 as well, but maybe my memory's off. So Deanne, I did have the FX6, and I sold all my Sony cameras and lenses, just like I did with my Canon cameras, and I just went with red. So yeah, it's just, there was nothing wrong with them. It was just, I needed to simplify my life and take some stress away. And having a single workflow is a better business decision than having cameras for specific types of projects. Now my pricing is way more competitive. No matter who is stepping on set for what type of project, we're all very good at working with that camera system. And that's an instant value to our clients and to the company. Let's see. Question from the Canon R6 user: buy the C70 or wait until 2022 for a possible update of the R5. So I would say that the only reason to buy a camera, okay, so here's the short answer. Depends. The only reason to buy a camera is if the camera is going to make you money immediately. If the camera you already own is making you money and you don't need another camera, or you can't double your earnings by getting a second camera, then you really don't need another camera. So I would wait and get the camera that you want to get. And I would get the best possible camera within whatever budget so that you can use it for a longer amount of time and not have to change every time that, Canon or Sony or Red is prodding us with and tempting us with their new products. So that's what I would do. If you are going to get a second camera, I would get a second body of whatever you already own, because of everything I just said about why I switched to a single system. One type of media, one type of battery solution, one type of charging solution, one workflow, so you can ingest the same way, you can work the same way from your laptop to your desktop and so on. So that's what I would do and my recommendation. What lens options would you suggest pairing with the Komodo for sharp clinical look? RF lenses, 100%. And and they're hard to find now because, they're not in stock in a lot of places, but that would be my number one recommendation. Number two recommendation would be Sigma. Between those two, you're going to get some incredibly sharp images. And if you want an EF mount version, the size Otis, those are beautiful lenses. I have a set of those and nothing beats them. Yep, so that's what I would say. ETA and your Raptor. So I thought ETA and the Raptor was actually going to be in October. And I'm now told it's the end of November. So it's not looking great. Yeah. And hence why I'm saying I don't really want to wait till the end of November. And if that turns into December or January, I'm just going to pick up another Komodo. Yeah, that autofocus video, I think you guys are going to like it. Just curious, what do you do with your older equipment that you no longer use, like your Blackmagic pocket cameras and others? I sell them. I sell it. So I bought a Pocket 6K Pro and I never took it out of the box. And I couldn't get myself to use it, which was weird. Initially, so here I'm going to tell you all a little bit about me, right? You all know that I only make videos about cameras and gear that I own. I don't borrow stuff from B&H to make videos. I don't rent stuff to make videos. I'm either using it or I'm not using it. And when I bought the 6K Pro, first off, the price is phenomenal. Some of the pictures that people are getting out of it, it just looks great. So the value that that camera can offer at the price point is unmatched in the industry, in my opinion. But I didn't want another workflow, and I didn't want to be locked into a Resolve workflow. And I didn't want to just make videos for YouTube about this camera if I wasn't going to actually use it. So after owning it for about 4 months, I sold it. And I sold it for like $300 less than what I paid with all the accessories, because I don't want to be fake. I want to be genuine. I want you all to know that when I say something, it's coming from real world use, not from an opinion that happened over a rental period. Which, by the way, this is one of the reasons why I like Philip Bloom's videos, even the ones that are 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes long, because he reviews gear over time. Because reviewing gear, you know, when you have a day to look at a product or a week to look at a product or even 2 or 3 weeks to look at a product, there's no way you've been in enough situations to know kind of what to tell you all, right? Like when I was making my C500 videos, one of the first videos I made was about how important it was to auto black balance that camera. I didn't come out and say, this is the way that you're going to get rid of fixed pattern noise, because nobody else was reporting on the fixed pattern noise. But I knew that auto black balancing the camera removed the fixed pattern noise, which is why I made that video. Why no one who owns that camera talks about it? Maybe it's because they always do auto black balance. I don't know. But there you go. So I knew that because I had been using it, and why it is that then I made that video. So there you go. Just in case you guys didn't know that about me, that's kind of the motivating factor there. And by the way, I use Gear Focus to sell my gear. I think that's it's a safe way to sell gear. So that's the reason why I use it. So I would recommend it. And no, they're not sponsoring this. Let's see. For me, the R5 gives the perfect autofocus, f1.2 and f1.4 shots with the ND adapter and Steadicam. Yeah, honestly, the R5, when I did the whole, camera comparison battle, and I compared the R5 against Red and against the C500 Mark II and so on, if you guys were not pixel peeping, you might have missed that the R5 clip looked what I would call significantly better than the C500 Mark II clip. So in my opinion, the R5 has more going for it. Let's just say that. And being able to capture in 8K and deliver in 4K from the R5 helps the R5 a lot. For me, as I said, I've already moved all of my motion to Red. I'm shooting only on Red. For stills, the R5 can still do that work for me. But the worry piece of shooting video on the R5 and maybe it'll overheat on me was enough for me to not do that again. There you go. Phil Holland, thanks for stopping by, man. Really appreciate you here. Get balance right via using a switch to allow mechanical follow focus and autofocus in the future. RF cine lenses, they'll be pretty amazing spot. Yeah, and Phil, I don't know if you heard me say this or not, but if Canon really does release some cine lenses that have an RF mount, I think that will be the next set. If they don't, then I'm going to be buying the Vista Primes. But I like the warmth that the Canon lenses give to my images, because I'm always working with people. And when I'm working with people, people like warmth in their skin. And those lenses do a good job of painting in camera. So I kind of like that. Simon, I got the C500 Mark II, but you can bet I'm getting a couple of the R3s. Yeah, the R3 is not a camera that I would consider for the stuff that I do. It just, like, I don't see how it would fit. And for stills, again, I have a medium format camera and I have the R5. So I don't really need what the R3 offers. And I will share this. Years back, I had the 1DX Mark II. And I was working on a project where we were shooting a clothing brand, and I was working with some toddlers who didn't have a lot of acting experience, right, or modeling experience. So I thought it would be a good idea to just put the camera in burst mode and then sort out which pictures were going to work for the brand that I was working on. What I didn't anticipate is that by the end of that shoot, I would have well over 10,000 images, stills, that I then had to go through to find the ones that I was going to be presenting to my client. So this whole idea of burst mode cameras is something that I've never used again, and why the R3, for me, just doesn't fit in my workflow or in the way that I do, the things that I do. But I think, if you're working with fast moving sports, I think that that's a great camera. I left my first HDR FX1 camera as a Momentum on the shelf. It's cool. I don't keep any of my old cameras. The only cameras that I've ever kept, even when I didn't use, well, they're not professional cameras, and they were film cameras. And now I don't use them because processing film where I live is a headache or a big process. So, yeah. C70 has been a great upgrade for me. The auto iris and ISO functions makes my solo man productions easy. Add to the advantages of the RF mount. So I actually never tried the auto iris on the C70. I can see how that would work, but how do you know it's not going to overcompensate? I guess would be my thing. And then also, here's something weird, right? Like in the stuff that I shoot, in the space and in the world that I work in, the shots are planned. So I know if I'm going from an interior to an exterior, I know that I need to get coverage for both what's happening in that transition from both angles, right? So leaving, like following and leaving, seeing someone leave, and then doing the opposite as well. So auto iris is not something that I've ever needed. I suppose and I don't do weddings, but I'm guessing that's the environment where that could come in really handy if you're having to go from inside a church or event center or something and then needing to go outside. Maybe in a documentary setting too, but in a documentary setting, I mean, unless you're following live action, like for electronic news gathering or something, in a documentary setting, you should be able to plan for those shots too, I think. Let's see. What's your thoughts on vintage glass, such as like R contacts? Overrated or live? I'm just going to say this. I really do like vintage glass for what it is if I need to paint in camera, right? And if you missed what I said earlier about I like to get clinical in camera and then massage my image into what it needs to be for my project in post-production, because capturing clinical and then going with a stylized look is easy. But when you capture in a stylized look, you can never go back to clinical. So I guess it depends on the project. Maybe it's the right thing. But do I like some of those looks? The answer is yes. And the person who knows the most about lenses ever was in the chat earlier, and that's Phil. And y'all can ask him anything. And this guy's either owns it, tested it, has it, or got an early release of whatever lens is available. And the man is incredibly generous with how much content he shares to all this community. So big shout out to Phil Holland. Really appreciate the guy. Let's see. I must note I decided on the C500 Mark II after a few years of the 1DX Mark II, the Red System, and the Alexa Studio. You know, I had the original Epic W and then the upgraded version that allowed me to capture 8K at 60p. So, you know, when we all sent it in for the unified body thing, when I bought my C500 Mark II, between those two cameras, I think that those two are very even. But the C500 Mark II compared to Monstro, there really is no comparison. Monstro is a camera way in a different league over the C500 Mark II. Helium, it's a closer race. Monstro, it's a very different system. So yeah, modern dance. I could see, Simon, how the R3s would be cool cameras for modern dance. Okay, I have the C200 and I'm so torn between getting the C70 or the Komodo, just holding on. I film sports. I hear C70s are wearing down. So I'll say this about the C70, and this is going to offend some people. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, as someone who no longer owns a C70. The C70, in my opinion, should not be a part of the cinema line. It should be a prosumer camera. The C200, while it was positioned as a prosumer camera, I think belongs with the cinema line. So if I had to make a decision today between the C70 and the Komodo, and frankly the C200, I would pick up two Komodos and say goodbye to the C70 or to the C200 and the C70. And in fact, that is the reason, that's one of the things that I have done, right? Switching over to Red exclusively. I have friends that are knocking it out of the park with their C70s, getting the right images for the types of work that they're doing, but they're all complaining about the build quality. So if it's a camera you're going to use and need to rely on set to make a living, then I think if you're considering the C70, you really need to consider two C70s so you have a backup. Because if structurally, build quality, it can't protect you while you're on set, it means it has the ability to get you fired. And no one likes to get fired. And this is why I said it's going to offend some people. I don't know if it's worth to invest in the C70 when people in the C70 group say it's breaking. Exactly. Komodo colors, I mean, Komodo is, I think Phil Holland actually said this first. Komodo is a camera that was built to augment, other Red cameras, but it will be the A cam for a lot of people in a lot of different types of productions. And I'm finding that to be the case for a lot of the work that we do. And it's also really cool that even my lower end clients, right, like my corporate clients, they can't walk into Best Buy and walk out with a Komodo. That's another big plus. Let's see. I might just stay with the C200 and save and get the C300 Mark III. So here's my thought about any kind of camera upgrade ever. You should always save up to get the camera that you really want and that will fit all of the production work that you're doing. Not some of it, not experiment. Even if it means you wait another month, another 3 months. Don't go through the cycle of buying something and then figuring out that you need to move in a different direction, because that will lose you money. My shots are not planned. It's all total chaos. Yeah, Stephen, I guess that makes sense. Just clouds moving can give you headaches. So that's actually a good point, right? Which is the reason why I'm using a big light source here, because today is one of those days where there are clouds and they're moving, and the exposure in the background I'm sure has been changing, but I needed the exposure here to stay consistent. Because you're right, exposure changes like that, you can't change them fast enough, and if your shots can't be planned, then that's a problem for sure. Canon ecosystem, or the Canon system. Simon, there's nothing wrong with liking any system, right? And I said this earlier. Like, I think if I was going to commit to Canon, essentially what I would have needed to do would have been to only run with C500 Mark IIIs. And for $15,000 or $16,000 per camera, it made more sense to go in a different direction. So whenever Canon gets their act together and they unify their color between camera systems, if it's in the cinema line, then all their cinema line cameras match. That's when Canon is actually helping us as owner-operators, filmmakers, and content creators. When they continue to pump out cameras that do not have unified color, even though they tell us they capture in the same way, C-Log 2, C-Log 3, RAW, and so on, what they really are doing is they're taking our money. Opinion. Loud and clear, good to see you, man. Really appreciate it. Faith House, always good to see you. How would two Komodo satisfy your need for high frame rates? So there's a video that will be released here very soon too about higher frame rates on Komodo. And I'll just say this as the short version of that video. The Canon focal reducer makes the Komodo a completely different camera, and a camera that can compete against flagship cameras from Canon and from Sony. And others, of course. It's that significant and impactful, and you don't take any image quality loss. So Komodo's a badass camera. What else can I say about it? As you and I have discussed at length, I believe Red has the most solid foundation, absolutely. And a few things they lack, be Sony and Canon in the world, would be way easier to develop in IPP2. So yeah, when it comes to workflow, Red's got your back. Red makes sure that it works across whatever software you want to use, and they make sure that no matter which camera system you're shooting on, you're not left behind and you're not left to sort out how to make them work. They make it easy for you by following their imaging pipeline. So Red, for sure, from a workflow standpoint, makes the most business sense. Thank you, Stefan. And thank you, Simon. So it looks like I got through all the comments. We've been at this for about an hour. So I guess thank you for all of you that have been, supporting the channel over the years. Obviously, content on this channel will be shifting away from Canon. Thank you for your continued support. And I will continue to cover Canon stuff, just not Canon camera comparisons, because, as I mentioned, I only make content about cameras and gear that I'm actively using, and I'm not using Canon or Sony cameras anymore. So thanks all of you for taking the time to join. Thanks for being awesome and showing your support. And I'll be sure to catch up with you guys on the next live stream or in the next video. Until then, have a great weekend and take care.